Okay, y'all, that just cut off, so I'm not sure exactly what the last thing I said was, and I always am afraid what if I come across wrong starting back on the next video. So, what I was talking about, we were in Genesis chapter 38, I'm sorry, 37, and Reuben has gone back to the cistern to rescue his brother, and it turns out he wasn't there. And of course, you know what's interesting? It just hit me. See this kind of thing that when you look at, Judah said to his brothers, he's talking to them, where was Reuben? It doesn't say he stayed back anywhere. So why didn't he know that Judah had taught them into, instead of killing him or hurting him, to sell him to the Ishmaelite traders? So why didn't he know that? Because it says he discovered that Joseph was missing, and he tore his clothes in grief, and then he went back to his brothers. I've missed something somewhere. I didn't know Judah wasn't with his brothers when all that happened. And he said, the boy is gone, now what will I do? He hadn't told them. Look there. Look above. It says in verse 21, Reuben was secretly planning to rescue Joseph. So he was secretly planning to come back. Why did he say, what will I do now, to the brothers? They were probably like, what? Why? He hadn't told them that he was going to do that. So that's interesting to me that that's mentioned. And he says the boy is gone. Like he didn't know. When Judah, it says he said to his brothers, in verse 26, it doesn't say except Reuben. I must be missing that Reuben went away for a minute. I don't know. I don't know what happened there. If I'm missing it, comment below. Say, well, Beth, don't you remember? Blah, blah, blah. Reuben wasn't there. Anyway, so the brothers killed a young goat, dipped Joseph's robe in it. This is the famous part of the story. These guys were jealous, right? But I don't think they really loved their dad. And you're thinking, Beth, you have no right to say that. Well, look what they did. Maybe they did. Or maybe they just wanted acclaim. I don't know why they did it. It says they sent the beautiful robe to their father with this message. Look what we found. Doesn't this robe belong to your son? He's all bloody dead. The father recognized immediately and said, yes, it's my robe, son. The animal must have done this. He's clearly been torn to pieces. He tore his clothes. He dressed himself in burlap. That's a way of mourning. He mourned deeply for his son for a long time. His family tried to comfort him. Is that the brothers or just some of the gals? I mean, I don't know who was there. Who's trying to comfort him? Those brothers? So they're just lying through their teeth, hurting their dad. Clearly, part of it is because they're trying to get away with it and explain, you know, so he wouldn't say, go find your brother. It's like, oh, he's dead. We don't need to go look for him. Jacob refuses to be comforted, it says. I will go to my grave mourning my son. And he would weep and weep. Meanwhile, the Midianite traders arrived in Egypt. They sold Joseph to Potiphar, the officer of Pharaoh, who was the king of Egypt. Potiphar was captain of the palace guard. Now, something else hit me later as I finished the book of Genesis that's got me thinking again. Later on, we're going to see that everything was sold out from the people of Egypt so that they were eventually enslaved to the Pharaoh. He's already their king. Why was that necessary? In other words, he already had rule over them. Why did they need to be slaves? The Egyptians of this king, why did they have to be slaves? He was Pharaoh over all of Egypt, of the Egyptians. He was their king. He was their ruler. Why did they have to be slaves to him? He already not owned them, but he ruled them. Anything he said goes. He's got just much power, so it's just weird. I'm just kind of like, even the king could have asked for taxes. He could have asked for the money and the stuff of the land to be given him. So it's just, I'm like, that's just really odd. We'll get there. I'll show you. All right, so chapter 38, Judah left home. and moved to Adullam, where he stayed with a man named Hirah. That's going to be important later. There was a Canaanite woman, the daughter of Shua, and he married her. When he slept with her, she became pregnant and gave him a son, Er. Then she became pregnant again and had a son named Onan. Then she had a third son and named him Shelah. And they, at that time of Shelah's birth, they were living in Kezeb. In the course of time, Judah arranged for his firstborn son, Er, to marry a young woman named Tamar. But Er was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord took his life. It's like, why didn't you take the boy's life that tried to kill Joseph? Because it was a bigger story. But apparently Er was bad, and God said, killing you. Okay, so God took his life. Then Judah said to Er's brother Onan, go and marry Tamar, as the law requires. You must produce an heir for your brother, so go marry her. But he didn't want to marry someone to give a child that wouldn't be his own heir. So it would be giving an heir to his brother, not to himself. So he went and had intercourse with her, but he made sure that he didn't deposit the seeds inside of her that would have given her pregnancy. The Bible actually says that. And so it's not holding back anything sexual or anything here. But the Lord considered it evil for Onan to deny a child to his dead brothers, so the Lord took Onan's life as well. You're dead. Okay. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, go back to your parents' home and remain a widow until my son Shelah is old enough to marry you. But Judah didn't really want to do this because he was afraid then Shelah would die like his two brothers. So he's like, are all three of my kids evil and God's just going to kill them all? So go stay and be a widow till he's old enough to marry you, but I'm not really going to marry you because God might kill him too. So is he pure-hearted about it? No. Okay, well, he's scared. And maybe he should be. God had taken two of his sons so far. And it makes you wonder, why were his sons evil? You know, this is a father's thing to look as a parent and say, did I have a part in this? And was this at me that God did this? None of that's covered. Maybe we'll see it later on. But anyway, some years later, Judah's wife died. At the time the mourning was over, he had his friend, Judah and his friend, Hirah the Adulamite, went up to Timnah to supervise the shearing of sheep. So now you have Judah's wife is dead. So he decides to go tend to the shearing of sheep. Tamar, who was aware by now that Shelah had grown up, but Jacob hadn't made any arrangements for her to marry him, so she changed from her widow's clothing, and she covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. Then she sat beside the side of the road to the entrance of the village of Enam, which is on the road to Timnah. So that's where he was going. And he noticed her. And because of the way, I guess, that she was covered and he didn't recognize who she was, and she was on the road on the way in, he thought she was a prostitute. And so he propositioned her and he says, let me have sex with you. There is no hiding things here. And he didn't realize that it was his own daughter-in-law. His own daughter-in-law. His son's widow. Sick. Okay, how much will you pay me to have sex with you, she asked. And I'm thinking, you did, girl? Oh, but she's going to get him. I'll send you a goat from my flock. And she's like, what guarantee do I have? And you may think you'd have sex for a goat. Well, it was a way to live. Goats were for goat's milk or meat or skin or whatever. They were a means to stay alive. So it's a payment. And he says, what guarantee do you want? She says, leave me your driver's license, your cord, and your cane. She says, leave me your identification seal and its cord and a walking stick that you carry. So he did. Then he had intercourse with her and she became pregnant. Afterwards, she went back home, took off the veil, and put on her widow's clothing as usual. This is very deceptive. Why? Because she realized Shelah had grown up and Jacob broke this promise to her. I'm sorry, Judah had broke his promise to her. So she's not happy. The fact that she covered herself and sat on the outside road to a city, was she trying to look like a prostitute so that she could get the proposition and then get the payment and then get up to her little scheme, which we're fixing to see. So later, Judah asked his friend Hurrah, the Adullamite, which we just saw, that's the guy that went in with him, to take the young goat to the woman to pick up the things he'd given her as a guarantee. So now he's admitting to his friend that he owed this woman some money. And whether he told him why or the guy didn't, but he did go. Hurrah couldn't find her, though. He asked the men who lived there, where can I find the shrine prostitute? So he did know. And they said, we never had a shrine prostitute here. And so he went back to Judah, and he says, I couldn't find her anywhere. They said they've never had one. And Judah said, you know what, let her keep the things that I gave her. Just let her keep it. And about 3 months later, Judah was told that Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has acted like a prostitute, and now she's pregnant. And he says, bring her out and let's burn her. For, what? Again, defiling the family for being a prostitute when he didn't take care of her. And maybe that was the only way that she thought she could make money, since now, you know, she's asking for a goat. And as they were taking her out to be killed, she says, send this message to my father-in-law. Tell him that the man who owns these things is the one who made me pregnant. Look closely. Whose seal and cord and walking stick are these? Oh my goodness. She is messing. Judah recognized them immediately and said, she's more righteous than I am. You know, because I didn't arrange for her to marry my son Shelah. And he never slept with her again, and he didn't kill her. When it came time for Tamar to give birth, it was discovered that she was carrying twins. There's all these twins. And so the midwife grabbed it as the baby was coming out first and tied a scarlet string around the child's wrist. Now, this must have been, I don't know, a custom of the day. Maybe some of you know these things.